Hey guys, it's Liz, and I'm back for another amazing nail audit. So happy Friday, everybody. And today's nail audit request was brought to us by Alex. This is going to be probably a longer format video, which I know you guys have been requesting. So let's get into Alex's request. Hi Liz, thank you so much for all the great information you give. My problem relates to filing the natural nail prior to an overlay and then finish filing shaping a nail that has an overlay. I feel like this is a massive time sink for me, probably because I don't have a good method. I have attached a video and pictures of me working on one of my mom's nails, as well as what her finished nails look like. I would really appreciate feedback on how to make this process better and quicker. Thank you. All right, so let's take a look at some of Alex's pictures. So this is just a picture of the nails from above, and I can see that Alex is going for kind of an almond shape here on shorter nails. So let's talk about that as we get into our filing. And also a side view of the sidewall. This is extremely helpful so I can see how you're actually filing into the sidewall. I can also actually see Alex's nails here, which I'll talk about in just a second. There's a couple of things that stand out to me that I want to go over with all of you. And then let's quickly watch some of Alex's video that she sent me because I feel like this is really helpful. So Alex is using one of the metal nail files where you can replace the actual abrasive pad. It looks like it's a moon shape. And I can see that Alex is just starting with the actual overall pointy shape while filing the nail. And then she's going back and trying to get more of that angled, pointy shape on this nail. You can see it kind of started out with like a square shape. Then she's going underneath. And there's a couple things, like I said, that stand out to me with this filing technique. And I actually have created my own artificial gel nail so I can show you guys exactly how to get better at filing. Now, the thing that stands out to me the most with Alex's filing technique is she's kind of going all over the place. And this is very, very common. So again, some of my feedback might come across as a little harsh, but honestly, this is all very normal. And filing is one of those things that takes a long time to get good at. So when we are filing, we want to have a better process and less of just trying to randomly go around the nail and just mold it into shape. So let's talk about what I would suggest for improving this filing technique. Okay, so Alex is trying to, like I said, create a shorter almond length with a nice pointy shape and nice kind of refined sidewall. So all of that makes perfect sense to me. However, there's a couple things, Alex, with the way that you're holding your nail file, the angle at which you're filing, and how you're kind of moving all over the nail all at the same time. But before I get into actually how to file the actual nail, there's one piece of information I'd like to share with you guys, and that is ultimately, filing a lot of the natural nail before you're going to do an overlay is kind of a waste of time. The only reason why I would actually shorten or shape a natural nail before I'm going to put product on is just to eliminate a lot of excess length that I would waste product applying on top of. So if we're going to be shortening the nail, if we're going to be drastically changing the shape of the nail, you can file a little bit just to, again, eliminate a lot of that excess length. But in this case with Alex's mom's nail, I actually would have applied all of the product. I would have pinched the nail a little bit because I know I'm going for more of a refined shape. And then I would have gone into the actual filing, okay? Now the challenge for me is today I only have a little fake finger that I can practice on for you guys. So it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to show that transition from the actual like natural nail length going into a different shape. However, I will absolutely follow up on this video with an actual natural nail video. I even have my friend Ashley that can probably do that for me at some point where I can show you guys what it looks like to change the length and shape of an actual nail and how much I would file before I actually go to put product on and put and do that finish filing. But in general, Alex, for this particular situation, I would not have actually done all of that filing before I put product on because ultimately the product is going to help you understand where that thickness needs to be placed. We can also pinch the nail to get it to be a little bit more of a narrow shape from the top. And then once the product is on, then I can go in and I can actually refine the product and the natural nail into the shape I want, all at the same time. It's going to literally chop off half of your filing time by doing that. So let me dig into a little bit of how I would do that. And also, like, I can even fold a piece of paper and show you guys exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to the natural nail only. And then I'll show you guys with actual gel how I would refine that shaping. Okay, so like we saw in the video, let's say we have a natural nail that has more of kind of like a grown out squoval shape to it. And we are wanting to ultimately make this more of like a refined almond. Okay, so the reason why I wouldn't worry about filing all of this into shape before I put product on is I actually want to be able to put product here and pinch this into shape. So by doing that, what I'm going to do is the nail is already super thin. I can see from Alex's video that she removed most of the product. And so the natural nail is pretty well thin and flexible again. So that's going to allow us to repinch the nail. So if I go back and I draw this one more time, this is kind of our squoval, thin, you know, maybe it has a teeny bit of product on top, but very, very thin. Here's our finger. What I want to do is put product over the top. And then I'm going to pinch this nail. And by pinching this nail, this is going to come in a little bit. Okay, so I'm already going to lose that bulk on the sides. It's going to get tucked under. So when I look at the nail, it's going to go from something like this to something, well, sorry, it's going to go something like flat like this to something like this, or maybe even something like this, depending on how drastic of a curve we can get. And when we're talking about actual pointy almond shaped nails, we actually do want to keep the sidewalls. So if I go back to one of Alex's pictures, you can see that she's keeping that sidewall pretty well intact, but we're starting to get a very flat almond nail because there isn't any nail or product that's kind of being pulled down on the sides. So what we want to do is do something like this. So when the nail comes out, so if this is the same kind of angle, we kind of want the nail to like gently swoop into an oval. Let me just see if I can. So we don't want bulk here, but we kind of want this to like tuck down and under, okay? So similar to like here, we want this to tuck down and under. We don't want to lose this sidewall because this sidewall is going to give us strength. So we want to make sure that we have a nice smooth transition right here. And if I go back to Alex's picture just one more time, if you look at Alex's actual nails as they're growing out, you can see that Alex's actual real sidewall, especially on her middle finger on the bottom right corner of this photo, you can see that her actual natural nail sidewall is much lower than where the actual nail is being filed into, okay? So this is a very common mistake with actually creating almond nails, is that we're trying to artificially file up into that sidewall to get it to look skinny from the top, to get it to look narrow from the top, but we're losing that actual strength and structure from the sidewall, okay? So if I even show you my nail as a perfect example, I don't have as drastic of an oval shape as her mom's nails, but if I just show you really quick kind of what I mean, this is the idea. Okay, so let me just zoom in here a little bit more. Okay, so I want to have this naturally swoop up here. I don't want to lose the sidewall material. So if I pull down my finger, I want to make sure that I have that sidewall intact the entire time. And as this grows out, I don't want to have it be where there's a notch missing. So just as a caveat there, as you guys are working with kind of almond shape or oval shaped nails, you want to make sure that you're maintaining that blend between your real sidewall of your nail. And you can see like my real sidewall of my nail is like up in here, okay? You want to make sure that this blends nicely into the actual shape that you're creating on top of the nail, okay? So that's basically what my rudimentary drawing here is supposed to show, is that instead of just shaving this off, which gives us ultimately a super flat, you know, even if it's like pointy nail, we're going to lose all of this sidewall material, and then we're going to end up with kind of this triangular shape as it grows out on the sides, because we're going to end up with this material moving downwards, and it's going to make kind of an awkward transition. So instead, like I showed you on my fingers, we want to have more of that smooth transition into the almond shape, and maintain that sidewall connection as it grows out. All right. So pinching is a great way to do that, even on shorter lengths. It's going to help tuck everything down. And if I show you guys even with just a piece of paper, let's talk about what that looks like. All right. So if I just shave off the corners, essentially what I'm doing is I'm doing this. Okay. So let me just fold this. Okay, so if I shave off corners on the natural nail while I'm filing, I end up with something like this, but I end up with a very, very flat nail, okay? I end up with like no curvature whatsoever. Instead of actually cutting off or shaving off those sidewalls in order to get more of a narrow shape, what I want to do is actually tuck those corners down in. So if I go from this kind of nail that's square, and I just tuck those corners in ever so slightly by actually pinching the nail after I've put product on, this is going to help tuck everything down in and make that nail more narrow. So you can even see up here, look how beautiful of a coffin shape I get when I tuck everything in. And then I go and I actually transition this out. So let's look at this, okay? So once I've pinched everything in, I still have these corners, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to file so that I get kind of a shape like that, where it gently blends from my sidewall into the free edge of the nail. And it can even go all the way to a point. I mean, it can literally go all the way to something like that. But I want it to be something where underneath I've got that curvature as much as possible, and I'm not making notches where the real sidewall meets the sidewall of the enhancement or of the extension. So I hope that makes sense. But I can see that a lot with people who want to do like the kitten nails or the very short almonds. It is difficult to go from the width of the actual natural sidewalls of the nail and get it to tuck directly into a pointy nail. So it is one of those things where you need to have a little bit more length to work with. And you need to also understand if you're just shaving off those sides, you're going to end up with a very, very flat, kind of like flappy point on the end of the nail instead of it having that nice kind of curvature and that cone that comes out from the finger. Okay, so I want you guys to think about, how do I create kind of a cone coming out instead of just a jutting flap that has the corners cut off of it. All right, so let's talk about filing, because I know you guys are probably very curious about that. Okay, so this is a fake finger, obviously, and fake fingers are extra difficult to work with because they don't have a lot of give on the sidewalls, right? Especially if we're using a plastic tip. It's very difficult to kind of get that nice refined shape. So they ultimately always have these very, very wide sidewalls. But I want to show you the filing technique and how you can really eliminate a lot of the bouncing around and kind of getting lost in your filing, okay? So when we start filing a nail, I want you to completely ignore, like literally from here down, any of this length, I want you to ignore it for the first several passes of your nail file. And I also want you to think about how you can create a rhythmic process or like a nice pattern as you go through, okay? So whenever I'm filing someone's nail, even if I have a moon file like Alex has, I'm only going to use this straight edge part of it as I go through and I do my shaping. So even if I have to turn my file all the way around, I am going to do that. I'm not going to use the straight edge on one side and then just flip it and use the curved side on the other side, because we're going to get different filing if we do that. So you can either put the adhesive strips on both sides of your nail file, or you're going to need to completely flip your nail file around if you're using a moon file so that you're using straight edge on left, straight edge on right, okay? The other thing too, if I zoom out, is let's talk about our hand and arm placement, okay? So here's my finger. When I am filing sidewalls, I always hold my nail file as if I'm holding kind of a butter knife, okay? You can extend your finger if you want to, but I actually usually just hold it all the way almost in the end. I want to be able to use the full length of my file. I don't want to be doing this with my filing because I'm only using this much of my grit. I want to use as much of the actual abrasive surface of my nail file as possible. And like I said, I'm going to make sure that everything is perfectly symmetrical. So if I'm filing with my nail file in this position on the right-hand side, I'm going to completely flip it around so that I'm also filing with that straight edge side and the moon side facing me on the left-hand side, okay? And as a right-hand dominant person or as a left-hand dominant person, whichever one you are, you are going to be naturally prone to over filing on the right hand side because we're able to push in so much easier. I'm going to end up over filing on this side and I'm going to end up under filing on this side. Okay. Now, if I have abrasive on both sides of my file, or if I'm using a straight file like this one, I can simply go from here to here as long as the grit is the same on both sides. Or again, I can flip the whole thing around so that I'm using the same grit on both sides of the nail. So we want to be as symmetrical as possible in every part of our process. Okay. The other thing too is when we go to file the underside of the nail, again, I want to use this straight edge, which I'll show you guys as I demonstrate this. I'm going to turn the finger so I can see. So when I'm filing the top of the nail, like sidewalls, okay, I'm going to pretend I have grit on both sides. Sidewalls, I'm going to look at the nail from the top. When I'm doing the top of the surface of the nail, I'm going to look at the nail from the top. However, when I'm going to be doing anything with the sidewalls and I'm going to be trying to like create a nice smooth transition, I'm going to completely turn this finger so that I can see the whole sidewall of the nail. I'm not going to kind of tip it at a 45 and try and look underneath and just get my hand under there. I really need to turn the hand all the way to the side so that I can basically use that same file position. I'm not going to go under it like this and do that unless I'm actually looking at the nail, okay? And this is where a lot of people get into trouble with filing is they're doing everything from the top, and so they're doing this kind of thing where they're going up and down, and then here and here and here, and just trying to get the nail to go into that shape from the top. But when you're only looking at the nail from the top, you end up with a whole bunch of mess from the side and from underneath because you haven't been considering the actual structure underneath the nail. Okay, so let's dive into exactly how we're going to file this particular nail. And again, filing this fake finger is going to be a little bit difficult because fake fingers are naturally just very flat. They're very difficult to get C curvature, and they also automatically just have a lot of bulk because of the plastic tips. They don't allow for a lot of flexibility and pinching, and I didn't even bother pinching this nail because of that, okay? But I'm going to talk about how we start this process. If I am working on a client, I'm actually going to replicate the same filing on all 10 fingers, okay? Or even on the full entire hand. It creates a lot more symmetry as you go through. So I'm gonna start, I always do the same thing every single time I file nails. I create the same pattern and the same habit. And this also helps me where if I get distracted, if I have to pick my head up, if I have to do anything like that, I can actually, I know where I was because I'm always doing the same pattern as I move through. So let's pretend that this is the first, the pinky or something of the left hand of the person. I'm actually going to file just the sidewall, and I'm going to keep my nail file perfectly straight up and down and just saw up and down into their sidewall. Now, I want to be careful not to push down into their skin. Really what I'm doing is I'm pushing this direction into the actual sidewall as I file. I'm not cutting down in as if it were a knife. I'm kind of pushing to the left and just filing straight up and down, okay? And I'm not even worried about the length right now. I want you to completely ignore that, okay? Now, the other trick with the sidewall is do not flick down at an angle. I want you to get used to kind of just going straight up and down, and then I want you to stop on the up, and I want you to pick up your nail file. Can you see how nice and straight I was able to make that sidewall compared to the other side? So let me dust off the dust. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm not even worried about this, okay? I'm not worried about underneath. I'm worried about the actual sidewall so that everything blends into that actual nail and to the length, okay? And then I'm gonna repeat that on all 10 nails. I'm gonna do the right sidewall of all 10 fingers. And this really shaves off a lot of time because I'm just gonna drop this finger and pick up the next one and pick up the next one. So I'm gonna basically go through my client like here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and go through all 10 fingers. Then I'm gonna come back to the first finger, and I'm going to turn my hand file around, especially if I'm using a hand file that has different grit on either side, which is totally fine. I love that too, but you have to just remember to turn your file around. And then I'm gonna do the left side of the finger, okay? And I'm gonna be extra conscious of the left side because since I'm a righty, I'm gonna be a little bit more awkward filing on this side, so I have to be a little bit more hyper aware of how I'm filing. So I'm gonna push this direction. I'm going to push into this side, not down, but to the right. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. And these flexible practice fingers do not hold themselves at all, so it's a little bit more difficult to keep this finger from moving. Okay. Okay, so stop. So there I've got both sidewalls filed, just like that. Okay. Then I don't go through the length or the underside until this entire surface is what I call chalked out. And that's because if I'm filing on clear gel, which I actually prefer clear gel, I chose pink builder for you guys so that it was easier to see on camera, but I actually prefer clear builder gel so that I can check the health of the nail every single time I take off color. Coverage builder gels are very beautiful, but they don't allow you to actually check if there's pocket lifting or if there's any type of infection happening underneath. They are more difficult for beginners because you can't see through them. So I personally recommend using clear. And so the reason why I go through the entire surface of the nail first is so that I have that chalky look to the nail and I can see the nail and the shape better. So now that I have both sidewalls refined, and you can see how much bulk that took off, okay? Now I'm going to follow this sidewall up and around, and I'm going to actually get rid of any bulk around the cuticle area. So this is a great opportunity to use that moon shape, or you can also use just a straight file. With a straight file, you're just going to kind of move it more so that you're getting lots of little micro lines. So for example, here's a curve, right? With a straight nail file, which I usually prefer straight nail files. The only difference with straight nail files is you're going to have to file like this, and then you're going to have to file like this, and then you're going to have to file like this, and then you're going to have to file like this in order to get the nail file to go in a curve, okay? With a moon, you don't have to do that because you're going to be able to have this kind of curve movement as you're filing, right? It's already a curved surface. But if you're using a straight nail file, all you're going to do is just move the nail file more so that you end up with these kinds of movements that ultimately follow the curve of the cuticle area. Okay, so with this moon file, just like Alex has, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to blend this sidewall. I'm going to try and blend it all the way around the cuticle area. And you can pull back the skin a little bit, go all the way through, and you'll notice I rotate the finger so I can see. I'm going to go all the way around. And then when I come down, I'm going to change my hand position. So let me back out just a little bit so you guys can see my hands, okay? So I'm coming up, curve, and I'm rotating the finger as I come through. And then right about here, my wrist is gonna break off. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over like this, and I'm gonna come around and hold my nail file like this as I come around, okay? And then I'm gonna rotate the finger again, and then I can come down and blend into that other sidewall that I had already filed, okay? So you should end up with something like this where you've got sidewall done. You've got the cuticle area blended, which looks really nice. I don't want to file a lot in here unless it's super lumpy because I don't want to take off my apex. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to come down and I'm going to blend this into the top, not on the bottom, but like on the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of come up here and start to blend everything up into the center. And I do this to refine the actual top, this part. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to get rid of any humps that are on that free edge, and I'm maintaining this height here in the middle. I don't want to go too crazy filing into that height because I want to maintain that, but I do want to make sure everything is nice and blended. And then again, I can rotate the finger and I can come down with my hand over the file. Okay. And as I'm filing, I'm checking. So I'm checking like this way to make sure if I put my finger over the top, this is what I usually do on clients, is I'll put my finger over the top so I have something on the background I can see. So I can see I've got a little bit of bulk right in here, just right on this little area. This looks beautiful. So this looks like a nice transition up into that center peak. And I can see that everything's starting to look symmetrical. So I've got the peak of the product right down the center. This is blending nicely on this side. This side, I still need to blend this transition. I've got a little bit of like a ridge right here where my fingernail ends, and I'm gonna blend that up in there, okay? Okay, and then if I want to just lightly go over the top of this apex just to chalk it all out and make sure I have one nice gritty surface, especially if I'm going to do anything, you know, different gel polish color or whatever, I have, you know, the same texture on the nail like that, okay? So this is what I call chalked out. Chalked out just makes it so much easier for me to see where there's actual height or thickness differences. So I'm gonna look at the nail like this, and then what I'm also gonna do is turn my client's hand around, and I'm gonna bend their fingers away from me, which is difficult to do with this little guy, but I'm gonna bend their finger away from me so that I can also see if there's any areas where I have a little bit of bulk, okay? So again, on this side, I've got a little bit of bulk right in here. So I can also file with the client's hand pointing away from me just to kind of try and get that bulk out of there, okay? And this also lets you see if there's any kind of, like, from the client's perspective, if there's any kind of hump or anything on the tip of their nail. But see how I'm able to get like a nice smooth transition from the sides all the way up to the top. So turning the fingers around, away from you, towards you, really looking at everything from a lot of different angles is the key to getting better at filing. If you're just looking at everything from here and you're just filing everything from the top, you're not going to be able to see all of the different areas that you need to take off, okay? And a lot of things are optical illusions when we're looking at nails. We think that there's bulk, and so we end up taking off more and more from the sides in order to get rid of the bulk, but really the bulk is actually the sidewalls, and usually in these kinds of areas, like in this band. I'll show you usually where this happens. Bulk usually happens here, 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 and here, okay? So those are the areas that we really want to focus on when we're filing the overall upper shape, is to get rid of any bulk that might be up there. And this is a great way to practice, is to put like Sharpie even or something on the nail to see if everything starts to file nice and evenly, okay? So let me file that off. All right, now the part that Alex started with, which is this underside shape, is actually the part that I do last. And the reason why I do last is because once the nail is actually chalked out like this, I can see the actual shape better. And I know that the actual upper part of the nail is smooth and well transitioned, okay? So I went from that lumpy, bulky nail to now I have a perfectly smooth, nice arched transition on the top. And now I'm actually gonna go in and make it into the shape that I want by refining even more. So before I file the sidewalls, and I mean the underside of the sidewalls, I'm gonna turn the finger completely on one side. I'm gonna make sure that I have the straight edge of my nail file. And just like I did the actual sidewalls from the top like this, I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm going to use my nail file at a complete, like, straight up and down angle. I'm gonna line it up with the real sidewall of this client's nail. And I'm going to put it right underneath there, and I'm going to file that first to make sure that it smoothly transitions into the length. Again, very nice and gentle, and I'm going to stop. I'm not going to flick upwards because I don't want to, and if I'm doing a square nail, I don't want to get into the habit of like removing this corner. So all I'm going to do is file straight up and down, and even just getting used to stopping on the up is a great way to get used to that. Look how beautiful that sidewall is, okay? Then I'm gonna turn, and again, all 10 fingers on this side, boom, 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 because the hand is already in that position, right? If I have the client's hand this way, I can do this finger, then this finger, then this finger, then this finger, rather than flipping back and forth, flipping back and forth. So keep the client's hand on this same angle, and then I can go from pinky to ring to middle to pointer all the way down, okay? Then I'm going to come back through all 10 fingers with their hands like this. I'm going to make sure I flip my nail file around so that I'm again using this straight side of my moon file, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to saw up and down, making sure that I see that I'm perfectly blending their real sidewall into the actual enhancement. And even if their natural nail is part of this underneath, I don't really care on an overlay, right? Overlays, yes, we're applying product over their natural nail length, but I don't really care if I'm filing off her natural nail underneath here. That doesn't make any difference, okay? So there we go. So now I'm already starting to get that kind of swoopy look just by taking off those sides. And now what I can do is I'm only going to refine and blend this part. I'm not going to go back up in here into the sidewall. I'm just going to refine this part into a point, okay? So now what I'm going to do is instead of going under completely like this and shaving off all of this, I'm actually going to go from the top and kind of blend downwards to get rid of any bulk. And then I can come down here. And I kind of always file like towards myself. I'm pulling it down. I want to pull everything down and tuck under, if you will. That's kind of how I think about it when I'm making more of an almond shape. And do a little bit at a time. Because if we file just underneath, if we're always filing underneath, we're going to end up making this nail very flat, which I don't want to do. So I actually want to kind of make these edges thinner and kind of pull everything down like this, pulling it down and filing down. Okay. And it will naturally start to get really thin on those edges. Pulling down. Looking at also the bones of the finger. So I always line everything up like the center of their nail. I line it up with the bones of their finger. I don't just look at the tip of the nail. I'm looking at their hand. I'm doing this really slow. Okay. But there. Now I have my pointy kind of almond. And when I turn it from the side, all I'm going to do is just kind of make sure that this gently transitions one more time. And that this gently transitions one more time. And again, you can do all 10 fingers, like so. Okay, so what I end up with is I don't lose those sidewalls. I've got the height that comes up, like this. And if I rotate all the way around, like that, see how I'm able to keep that kind of curvature and everything kind of goes down into a cone. And this stays actually straight. So the key here is that this whole pointy part basically lines up with here and everything kind of comes straight out. Okay? So this is something that I think is one of those things where it's if you're looking at everything from the top and you're trying to file everything from underneath, if you're constantly putting your nail file underneath the nail like this, that is a surefire sign to me that you're not actually looking at what you're filing, okay? The only time I put my nail file underneath the nail is if I have two sidewalls that don't line up. I actually look at the nail like this while I'm filing. I will use the flatness of my nail file and I will just very, very, very gently file underneath so that the sidewalls line up. But I don't actually look at the nail from the top and file underneath the nail. I'm actually filing down like this, down and making kind of a cone shape. And then also what I can do is I can go right on the tip and file back up so it's kind of like a cone on the very, very, very tip. That way I don't end up with like any humps. I'm gonna look at the nail one more time down here, check everything, okay? That looks pretty dang good. And I also am gonna take into account that I'm gonna put color and top coat over the top of this nail too. So if I have any spots where I'm like, ooh, maybe I overfiled a little bit, I've got a little bit of a divot, don't continue to file because you're ultimately going to end up removing product. You also have the option to add product as you go in with your color layer, and you could even add like one more layer of base coat if you want to on top just to kind of refine the shape. And then you also have the ability to fix the top of the nail with top coat. So don't get super fixated on just your filing because filing ultimately is going to continue to remove product. And sometimes we need to add product, not just remove product. Okay, so let me dust all of this off. All right, so there is my filing. And also I see right here, one thing that I don't like is I've got a little hump right here. So I can also just take that off. Blend that back up to the top. That looks better. Okay. So there you have it. Now this is lined up with her finger, comes all the way down. And if you want to get in there or whatever, this, I've just got like a little piece of the plastic tip sticking out right there, the glue, that's totally fine. But honestly, let's put color on this and see how smooth we got it. All right. I'm just going to refine this nose just a teeny bit more. There we go. So I'm going to ultimately end up with a very, very thin free edge. You can see right there, I've got a nice thin free edge. Again, I don't care if her natural nail is getting filed out from underneath, right? But everything kind of comes down. You can see like everything kind of curves down and everything comes from the apex and down. And then everything kind of comes into this nice cone. So I want you guys to start thinking about cones and less of that filing the undersides just to chop the corners off. That's really how you make a huge difference with your shaping. And it's also ultimately going to end up giving you more structure, more strength. It's going to maintain those sidewalls as they grow out. As this client's sidewall grows out, I'm not going to have any notches or divots or any of that stuff. So let's put some color on top. And I'll show you what I mean. And actually that little piece of glue is bothering me, so let me just see if I can get it out of there. Sometimes these silicone fingers just have all kinds of things that grab on. Okay, so I've got everything dusted off. One other thing before I put color on is there's also like a misconception about like sealing the product around the cuticle area. So I would not go back with an e-file unless you had accidentally touched the sidewall and it's completely like flooded in there. Be very cautious about doing that and just practice being further away with your product as you apply it, because you're going to ultimately end up really irritating the skin and probably also filing too much of the natural nail. So you're going to end up, kind of getting those rings of fire if you're sealing the nail all the time. There really isn't any need to seal. I mean, you can see with my gel application and just a little bit of going around the edges, this is perfectly blended into her natural nail, even though you can see right here that shiny perimeter. I didn't actually go in and file all of that gel. I just went around and filed off the bulk, okay? So let's see how this goes with applying color. So with a longer nail, I always start here to give me something, to get most, if I've got a drip on my brush, anything, I always paint the free edge first. Okay, and that's looking pretty smooth. So this allows me to see, like, is my nail actually really smooth or not? Then I can start to get closer up to the cuticle area, come down. I actually like to put gel polish right on top of a 180 grit filed nail like this. I don't even bother buffing it or anything because this gives something for my gel polish to actually adhere to, gives it something to grip to. So don't be buffing your finished filed nails. You just want to leave them about 180 grit, okay? Then I'm going to come up. I can just kind of jiggle. And again, if you're having a hard time keeping your product away from your skin, just leave a little bit more of a perimeter. You don't have to try and go for the gusto with getting super, super, super close right from the beginning as you're learning. And also clients tend to jab you. I mean, people sneeze, people move. So I always leave a little bit of a perimeter. And then if I want to go back on the second coat and try and get a little bit closer, I can. Now, one of the things that I showed you guys in one of my previous videos is I like to kind of come up with my brush and try and get a little bit closer. I have like nothing on my brush right now, but I'm going to like swoop up here. Just get a teeny bit closer. Just using the edge of that corner to swoop the existing gel polish up a little bit closer on the skin. And then I just blend everything back down like that. Okay? You can also use a detail brush if you want to. But that looks pretty dang smooth to me. And from the sides, I can make sure I get this little edge right there. Okay? So it comes all the way down the sides. Now I can see right here, pointing out my own work, okay? I can see right here, do you see this little, this little divot right here? See, like right there, there's like a little low spot. I wouldn't worry about that. I would actually fill that in with top coat because it's not structural. It's just something that you can see like a teeny, teeny little bit. And then also when I apply my gel polish, sometimes what ends up happening is we end up with too much product right on the very, very tippy tip of the nail. So I can even just take a little bit of that off to make it less exaggerated, okay? So see right there? Then it helps a little bit. Just tells me I've got a little bit of product on the tip. Okay? So putting some color on also lets you see how smooth the actual nail is. And it also allows you to see a little bit more of the shape. So I probably could have refined a little bit more on this left side. Again, my difficult side is going to be my left side of every finger because it's more awkward to file that. But again, I can always put maybe a little bit more top coat on this side just to fill that in. So let's continue. So while that's curing, as you can see, like there's a lot we can do with our filing, but then there's also a lot we can do as we actually apply our nail art, our color, our top coats, whatever it might be. Filing ultimately is going to get you 90% of the way there. And yes, you could spend 2 hours filing nails into complete perfection, but nobody really has time for that in a salon setting. And we also don't want to be taking 5 hours even doing our own nails. So it's kind of this give and take that we have to do with how far and how good can we get it in one phase of the actual service before we need to move on to another phase of the service. And like I was telling you guys, that ability to continue to have that, if I have my nail file here, going through all 10 fingers on the same side before I come back and not actually flipping and doing everything all on one nail, it's going to allow you to get everything more symmetrical. It's going to save a bunch of time. And as you practice this, you're going to get better at your own muscle memory, going through every single nail and making sure that you have that consistency and that symmetry throughout all of your filing, okay? And you can also see with how much filing I did on this gel that I ultimately didn't need to file that natural nail into this shape to begin with. I could have just applied all the product, as lumpy as it was when I first started. I could have applied all of the product and then filed everything into shape. And even if I end up filing into that natural nail, it doesn't matter because it's all basically encapsulated in product anyway. All right, so let's put our second coat of color on. Second coat, you can put it on a little bit more like as if you were putting on nail polish. It'll just stay in place a little bit better. And this is what we're looking for, is as smooth and as opaque as we can get it on this coat. If you have a gel polish that takes 3 coats, I recommend considering getting rid of that just because it is a big time suck. And then the other thing too is I give the gel polish a second to self-level before I put it in the lamp, okay? So if we just give it just 1 second, it self-levels into a nice glossy sheen. And even if there's like little divots I can see in my reflection, like right there on the left-hand side, I see a little divot. We're gonna fix that with our top coat. But this nail looks pretty darn smooth, especially for salon quality. That's also something I want you guys to consider is there's a mix between the amount of time you're able to spend with each client for the price point that they're paying. And even if someone was willing to spend $400 with you for 4 hours of your time to get their nails done, there's also going to be a point in the appointment where people just get sick of sitting there. So I ultimately recommend that you guys keep everything to 90 minutes or less. If you can get a client in and out in 90 minutes, that's ultimately going to be more of a sweet spot where you're going to be able to charge accordingly. They're not going to get super frustrated or super tired of sitting there, and you're going to have enough time to get it to where it is great work. It might not be perfect work every time, but it's going to be great work, much better than average, and it's going to be something that equates to the value of the money that they are paying you for that same appointment. All right, so we have our 2 coats of color, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with my top coat. So I'm just going to use a regular gel polish top coat. I'm going to go in and do like my nice wet layer, and this is where we can really even fix things even more. So I'm going to do a nice glossy kind of medium thick layer, get up close to the cuticle area. You can also use a detail brush for this if you want to. Some people are getting into using detail brushes to move their top coat around. You can do that. I also like to put a little bit here on the end. And then what I'm going to do is if I have any divots, okay, I'm going to actually take a little dollop of top coat. I'm going to run it right down the ridge of this nail all the way to the tip. I can also turn the finger upside down if I want to. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the nail like from here. So I'm looking at it like this way, and then I'm looking at it from this way, and I can even kind of make that apex a little bit more heightened back towards the cuticle area. Then I'm going to flip the finger over, give it a second to self-level, check one more time, and then have the client put their finger in the lamp. Okay, so now I can go in and I can cleanse the nail. We want that squeaky clean finish. Okay, so now I have perfect gloss. Can you see how like I don't have any more squigglies in my line of light anymore, my little dots I've got on there? And that's because I was able to use the top coat to perfect that upper arch. So look how freaking smooth that nail is, and I was able to just perfect that last little bit with my top coat. I didn't have to spend extra time filing. I just used my other layers of product, and also I focused a little bit more bulk of the top coat on this side to help balance out the bulk that I had on this side of the nail so that optically it looks like it's perfectly smooth. And then I can also check from here. So I've got nice even thickness, nice even arch. And from this side also, perfectly smooth transition, and those sidewalls are just like a razor's edge, okay? So again, this ability to create this kind of shape doesn't come from undercutting the nail. It comes from actually all of those different filing techniques and using that same pattern consistently so that you guys are able to come up with this nice, beautiful symmetry every single time you file. If there is anything, okay, even on an overlay, let's say I had natural nail underneath here, okay, if there is anything that's bugging you about the actual shape, you can ever so slightly come in and just very gently refine it. You can even use like a buffer for that. Like sometimes even a buffer is all you need to kind of just get it to perfectly smooth out like that. Okay, so if there's anything bugging you, you can come in with a little bit more and just come in on that side and just do a little bit of refinement. But honestly, it's going to get into the territory of like a client not even noticing that. I mean, their nails are going to be so wickedly smooth on the top, they're not even going to notice. I mean, this feels like glass. So that's something I recommend that you guys kind of, yes, you want to get better at doing all of your filing, but don't let it get to the point where you're spending way too much time on something that ultimately no one is going to care, no one is going to notice, and it's not really going to move the needle for you from a service perspective. All right? And then one last trick, always, just in case, is I like to always do a check on my clients' nails to show them that I'm also paying attention. So I will put cuticle oil all over their nail after I've cleansed, after I've checked everything for any like pits or issues that I, maybe the top coat didn't cure properly. I don't want to do that after I've applied top coat because it's more difficult to get all the oil off. But I can basically massage in the cuticle oil on this finger, and I can also be feeling the edges of the nail. So I'm massaging the cuticle oil in underneath their nail, all around their nail. And this is my opportunity to check, like, is there any sidewall or any little thing sticking out that feels gritty? Okay. If there is, I can go in and file it. And then what I do at the end is I just kind of buff all that cuticle oil into their finger so that it ultimately ends up with like a nice shiny clean nail, not too much cuticle oil, etc. Okay. And on a client, like their skin is going to relax back down. So you're going to get something that's a little bit more like this. When we're working, we can kind of pull that skin back so we can see that nice clean perimeter and that nice clean line where there's not going to be any lifting or any hair getting stuck or anything like that. But then ultimately their skin's going to relax back down. So they're going to end up with this beautiful color right against their skin. And they're going to ultimately end up with such a beautiful shape and that nice smooth surface, even for that kind of shorter almond nail. Okay. The shorter that this nail gets, the more difficult it's going to be to keep this transition on the sidewall. So that's why people who are wanting kind of kitten nails or something like that, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to provide that on short nails. But Alex, like I saw in your video, your mom's nails look like they have a little bit of length there. So continue to create that kind of dome on top. Apply that product before you file them into shape. Pinch them if you can, just to get a little bit more of that curvature. We'll go over pinching in another video as well to show you guys exactly how to do that and when to do it. But I think if you apply the product first and use those more organized filing patterns and more organized and regimented filing techniques, I think you're ultimately going to find that you're going to get a much more smooth, symmetrical nail. Just keeping in mind that we're not looking at the nail from the top the entire time. You actually need to pick the hand up, look at everything from the sides as you file, move everything around, turn the hand around away from you, look down their nails like this to check for any thickness or any lumps and bumps. Look at it from the top as well as you look down the actual finger. See if there's any bulk, like I'm looking at it down this way. Turn the client's hand around and bend their fingers away from me so I can see what that looks like. Look from all the sides and all the angles. That's going to help you get better at your filing. But filing on top of product is a lot easier than trying to get a flat natural nail to go into the shape that you want it to be. All right? I hope this video helped all of you. As always, please leave me comments down below. If there's anything that wasn't clear, we can always do follow-ups to any of these nail audits as well and dive deeper. I've already gotten a couple of requests on some of my nail audits to take them a little bit further to revisit some of those topics. And these are ultimately all going to fall into buckets. I mean, every single troubleshooting issue that we have as people that are interested in doing nails, they're going to ultimately fall into categories. It's going to fall into something with filing or product application or removal or nail health or any of those different things. And these are topics that we're always trying to revisit so that we can get better and better as we practice more and more. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I hope this video was very helpful. And I encourage you guys to take advantage of submitting your own nail audit. If you'd like to submit your own troubleshooting request, topic, question, anything, go to thenailaudit.com, upload a video or picture to help support your issue. Describe your issue in as great detail as you possibly can, because the more detail, the better, including any products used, techniques, specific issues you're experiencing, anything like that. You can write me a novel if you want to. The more, the better. And that helps me create a more detailed video response for all of you here within the Nail Hub TV. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.